Can dreams truly be deadly? Has anyone ever had a dream that predicted the future exactly? Or have you heard about the man who gruesomely killed his wife and mother-in-law with an axe, claiming ostriches and dreams made him do it? These are just a few of the bizarre and fascinating topics we'll explore today as we dive deep into the strange and mysterious world of sleep. Unlike the wild dreams we'll discuss, there's one kind most people don't complain about, so-called wet dreams. These are surprisingly common. According to the Journal of Sexual Medicine, around 83% of men experience at least one in their lifetime, an event known scientifically as a nocturnal emission. Though they can happen at any age, they're most frequent during puberty when hormones surge. In Indonesia, studies show that nearly 97% of young men had experienced one before turning 24. Even among religious teens who avoided masturbation for spiritual reasons, about 70% still reported wet dreams. Simply put, nature has its own plans, and your brain and body are part of it. But it's not just men. Women experience these dreams too. A study in the Journal of Sex Research revealed that about 85% of women had a nocturnal orgasm by age 21. Though women don't produce semen, they may still experience discharge, making it a wet dream of their own kind. Around 8% of all dreams have sexual themes, and roughly 4% of those end in orgasm. Still, men have them more often. This isn't new. It's been happening for as long as humans have existed. The Bible even mentions it. In Deuteronomy, soldiers were told to leave the camp and purify themselves if they experienced nocturnal emissions. Ancient societies often saw such dreams as a sign of impurity or demonic interference. Buddhist texts warned of spirits that seduce sleepers, draining their energy. Medieval Europe was even more superstitious. Books like Malleus Maleficarum described demons called succubi and incubi who had sexual contact with humans in their dreams. During Europe's witch trials, such beliefs turned deadly. Between the 14th and 17th centuries, as many as 500,000 women were tortured and executed. In one infamous case from Ireland, a woman named Dame Alice Keitler was accused of consorting with demons and performing dark rituals involving animal parts and human remains. Though she fled to England, her servant Petronilla de Meath was tortured and burned alive. In those times, sleep and dreams were thought to be linked with evil. Fast forward to today, and science sees dreams quite differently. The average person dreams 3 to 5 times per night, even if they don't remember. Most dreams last from 5 to 20 minutes, and over a lifetime, we'll spend about 6 years dreaming. Forgetting dreams is common, due to low levels of the hormone norepinephrine in the brain during sleep. The hippocampus, which forms long-term memories, is also less active during this stage, which is why dreams slip away so quickly unless recalled immediately upon waking. Our most vivid dreams occur during REM, rapid eye movement sleep. This is when breathing becomes irregular, heart rate rises, and the eyes move quickly beneath closed lids. A full sleep cycle lasts about 90 to 120 minutes. Most people dream in color, though around 12% report dreaming only in black and white, especially those over 55, possibly because they grew up watching black and white TV. Interestingly, blind people dream too. Studies found that they often dream about sounds, smells, taste, and touch rather than visuals. A blind film critic once said he sees people in dreams by recognizing their voice or scent, not their face. Animals also dream. Rats, for instance, have been observed replaying waking activities in their dreams. Cats, too, act out dreams if the part of their brain that paralyzes muscles during sleep is removed. They'll jump, hunt, and fight imaginary enemies while still asleep. Then there's sleep paralysis, one of the most terrifying sleep experiences known. It occurs when the body remains paralyzed during REM sleep, even though the mind wakes up. People can hear, see, and sense their surroundings but can't move or speak. Many report feeling a sinister presence in the room, often described as a demon or night hag sitting on their chest. Science explains it as a temporary overlap between REM paralysis and waking consciousness, but centuries ago, it was believed to be an attack from evil spirits. About 8 to 50% of people will experience sleep paralysis at least once, and 5% suffer from it often. It can be triggered by stress, anxiety, or medication. The brain misfires, sending motor signals while the body remains immobilized, creating hallucinations that seem terrifyingly real. Nightmares and night terrors are also part of the darker side of dreaming. Around 8 to 30% of adults have nightmares, while 20 to 30% of children experience them. Night terrors, more violent and dramatic, often cause people to scream, thrash, or even attack others in their sleep. They're most common in children, but can persist into adulthood, especially among those with PTSD. There are real stories of people harming loved ones in their sleep without realizing it, a frightening reminder of how the dream world can blur with reality. Science has even documented dream murders, where people commit violent acts while sleepwalking. One man killed his wife and mother-in-law, claiming he was lost in a dream and believed ostriches were attacking him. In such cases, the brain fails to trigger paralysis, letting the body physically act out dreams. Dreaming, however, isn't all horror and chaos. Sometimes it brings peace. There's even a term, eunorephrenia, for the calm happiness that lingers after a pleasant dream. Stress reduction, mindfulness, and positive routines before bed are proven to improve dream quality. Men and women dream differently, too. Men's dreams are often more aggressive, featuring competition or confrontation, while women's dreams center around relationships and emotions. About 65% of men and 70% of women report recurring dreams. Common themes include falling, being chased, or losing teeth. These often reflect real-life fears or insecurities. Dreams also borrow from reality. Faces we see, sounds around us, or even body sensations like warmth or cold can appear in them. The brain doesn't invent new people. Everyone in your dream exists somewhere in your memory. Interestingly, certain substances can induce dreamlike experiences while awake, like DMT, the powerful hallucinogen found in ayahuasca. Users report vivid, otherworldly visions similar to deep REM sleep. Research shows DMT alters brain waves much like dreaming, creating powerful, waking dreams. Such experiences have even helped people overcome depression and trauma, proof that the dream state, whether asleep or awake, can be deeply therapeutic. Dreams, in many ways, act as emotional medicine. Studies show they help the brain process pain and trauma, overnight therapy, as New Scientist calls it. They reveal hidden fears and offer insight into unresolved emotions. Even nightmares can serve as messages from the subconscious. About 55% of people experience lucid dreams, when you realize you're dreaming while still in the dream. This awareness gives control. You can fly, fight, or change the story. It's different from sleep paralysis because you know it's not real. However, some experience false awakenings, where they dream they've woken up only to realize they're still asleep. A concept that inspired Inception. Dreams also occur in comas. People who've awakened from them describe entire alternate lives, towns, and relationships that felt completely real. One patient said waking up felt like being ripped from one universe into another. Another man, after a COVID-induced coma, dreamed for 11 days that he was a delivery driver for Tesco, kidnapped by a London gang, and tortured. An entire nightmare life before returning to reality. Dreams can be terrifying, healing, or transformative. Across cultures, they've been seen as messages from gods, windows into the soul, or echoes of other worlds. From Native American dream catchers that filter out bad dreams to the DMT-fueled visions of Amazonian shamans, humanity has always sought to understand the power behind the sleeping mind. And sometimes, just sometimes, dreams tell truths we can't face when we're awake. Bundy's arrest sent shockwaves across America, but for in Rule, the pain carried a different weight. She had known him, truly known him, from the years they worked together at a crisis hotline center. She remembered his calm voice helping strangers through despair, never imagining that same voice would one day belong to one of the most terrifying men in history. In her quiet reflection, and often wondered how darkness could hide so easily behind such warmth. Her later writings, especially The Stranger Beside Me, became more than just a retelling. It was her way of making sense of the impossible. She transformed horror into understanding, confusion into quiet insight. As the years passed, people began to question what dreams meant in all of this. Could a mind so divided between good and evil have ever rested peacefully? Did Bundy dream of his victims, or did he escape into visions of a world where he wasn't the monster the world knew him to be? The human mind has always been a mystery, capable of creation, destruction, and disguise. When people fall asleep, their dreams can reveal fragments of truth, but they can also protect them from it. For psychologists studying Bundy, the question of his inner world became a haunting fascination. Dreams are mirrors of the subconscious, but what happens when the reflection is shattered? It's believed that Bundy, even in the moments leading to his final days, showed glimpses of something like remorse, though no one could tell if it was genuine or part of his endless performance. He was both an actor and an audience in the theater of his own mind. When the night grew quiet in his prison cell, perhaps he drifted into dreams of the mountains of Washington, the smell of pine, the laughter of his early years. Maybe the brain, desperate to protect itself, replaced blood with sunlight and silence with wind. The human mind, after all, seeks peace even in torment. And so, his story became a strange reflection of how far the psyche can stretch between the desire for control and the longing for rest. And Rule's book didn't just expose the killer. It exposed the fragility of trust. It made people question how well we truly know those around us. Our neighbors, our friends, even our own hearts. She wrote not with hatred, but with the slow ache of disbelief. In her gentle voice, the horror softened into understanding. A realization that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it smiles, helps, and remembers your birthday. In the stillness of her later years, and often spoke about empathy, about how even the darkest stories can teach us something about our own humanity. Her reflections invited readers to look inward, to face their own hidden corners without fear. Perhaps that is what all true stories do. They force us to see that both light and darkness exist within us. As night deepens, and you listen to these thoughts, let the story unfold not as a tale of terror, but as a quiet meditation on the mysteries of the human mind. The same mind that created art, music, and love also carries shadows that whisper beneath its calm surface. But just as night always gives way to dawn, there is always the promise of awakening, of understanding ourselves a little more each time we dream. Bundy's execution in 1989 marked the end of a long nightmare for many. But for psychologists, criminologists, and even dream researchers, it was only the beginning of deeper questions. What makes a person cross the line between thought and action, between fantasy and reality, between dreaming and waking? These questions linger like faint echoes long after the story ends. In the silence that followed his death, Rule sat by her window one night, watching the moon rise over the city. She thought of all the lives touched by the man she once called a friend. The quiet hum of the world outside felt both distant and forgiving. She wrote in her journal that evening that perhaps, in the end, peace doesn't come from understanding evil, but from accepting that it exists and choosing still to believe in good. If you close your eyes now and breathe deeply, you may feel that same balance, the awareness of both darkness and light. That is where sleep lives, in the gentle space between awareness and surrender. The story of Anne and Bundy, of friendship and horror, becomes a distant echo, fading softly, replaced by the slow rhythm of breath and heart. And as your thoughts drift, remember that the mind, even when burdened by memory, has the power to heal. Just as night hides the chaos of the day, dreams hide the noise of thought, letting you rest, letting you remember that within the same mind that fears, there's also endless capacity to forgive, to hope, and to begin again. In the quiet years after Bundy's execution, and Rule continued to write about crime, but her words were never driven by fear. They were reflections, gentle and searching, tracing the outlines of what makes people do what they do. She often said that writing helped her sleep, that turning chaos into sentences gave shape to the noise that once kept her awake. Perhaps that is what storytelling has always been, a way for the mind to soothe itself, to give meaning to the unthinkable. She once described the human mind as a vast house, with rooms filled with light and others lost to shadow. Most people spend their lives in the familiar rooms, the ones with laughter, music, and memory. But there are doors that few open, where forgotten things wait quietly. In some, there are regrets. In others, old fears. And in the deepest ones, there are secrets we hide even from ourselves. Bundy's story, she realized, was about what happens when someone begins to live only in those darker rooms, closing all the doors that lead back to light. Psychologists call it dissociation, the separation between who we are and what we show. But on a quieter level, everyone experiences a gentler form of it. We all wear masks, polite smiles when we're sad, calm words when we're afraid, laughter when we're lonely. Yet beneath those masks, dreams become the one place where we can't pretend. When we sleep, the mind wanders freely. It rearranges memories, mends old wounds, or replays moments we thought we had forgotten. Dreams are not random. They're the soft language of the soul, the whispers that say what waking words cannot. Perhaps that's why some people dream of running, or falling, or searching for something they can't name. Is the subconscious reaching out, asking to be heard? In the late years of her life, and Rule would often write late into the night. She kept the lights dim, her window slightly open to let in the night air. She said she liked the sound of distant traffic, the proof that the world was still moving, still alive. In that stillness, she thought often of Bundy, not with anger, but with quiet curiosity. What did he dream about in his final hours? Did his mind show him what he had done? Or did it build a different story to protect him? Perhaps in that last night, he saw the faces of those he hurt, not as strangers, but as fragments of his own broken self. Maybe he saw them forgive him, or maybe they simply faded, leaving him in silence. There is no way to know, but the mind, even in the most twisted souls, searches for rest at the end. Dream researchers have long believed that even the most restless minds can find peace through sleep. That the act of dreaming is the brain's attempt to reconcile contradictions, to take the pieces of our lives that don't fit and soften their edges until they do. It's a process that never stops, not even for those who have committed unthinkable acts. Anne's reflections slowly moved beyond crime. She began to write about empathy, about how every story, no matter how dark, reveals something human. She said that to understand evil is not to justify it, but to accept that it grows from the same soil as kindness, fear, and love. That realization haunted her, but it also brought a strange calm. When asked how she managed to sleep after writing such stories, she smiled and said, "Because I write them." It was her way of releasing what the mind holds too tightly. She turned fear into words, and words into release. Perhaps that is the same reason so many people listen to stories like hers before bed. The mind needs to hear that chaos can be understood, that even in tragedy, there can be peace. Imagine her room now, the quiet ticking of a clock, the faint hum of a lamp, a notebook resting open on the table. Outside, the world breathes softly beneath the night sky. The same moon that once watched over the chaos now shines gently through her window. There is comfort in that repetition, the idea that time heals, that life continues its quiet rhythm, that even stories born in darkness can end in light. If you're listening now, let this story become distant. Feel your breath deepen. The details blur like ripples fading on still water. The world that once felt sharp and restless begins to soften. You realize that the mind doesn't need to solve everything before sleep. It only needs to release it. The story of Enrule and Ted Bundy becomes something else now. Not about murder or fear, but about the mystery of the human mind. About how fragile trust can be, how easily the line between love and danger can blur. And yet, within that fragility, there is still beauty. The beauty of empathy. The beauty of awareness. The beauty of still being able to dream after knowing darkness. Dreams are the final storytellers of the night. They take what we've heard, seen, and felt, and weave them into shapes that help us rest. Some dreams are strange. Others are warm and familiar. But all of them, in their own way, are gentle acts of healing. As you drift now, imagine the night wrapping around you like a soft blanket. The air is calm, the thoughts are quiet, and your heartbeat slows into a peaceful rhythm. The story fades, replaced by silence, the kind that doesn't frighten, but comforts. In that silence, remember this: even the darkest stories can end in peace. Even the most restless minds can find stillness. And even after all the chaos, the world still hums softly, waiting for morning. Now, let the rest of the story dissolve. Let your breathing guide you deeper. There's nothing left to analyze, nothing left to understand. Only the calm rhythm of night and the quiet knowledge that you are safe, that you are resting, and that tomorrow will come gently, as it always does. When dawn came, it arrived softly, as it always does, without judgment, without noise. The world outside Anne's window glowed faintly, the gray of early morning stretching across the sky like a slow exhale. She often said that this hour, the one between night and sunrise, was the most honest. It was when everything was half awake, when a mind still lingered in its dreams, but the body had begun to remember its weight again. It was in this gentle in-between that she found the most peace, and had long believed that people misunderstand darkness. To her, it wasn't always something to fear. It was simply the other half of light, a space for rest, for reflection, for truth to breathe. Without darkness, we would never understand warmth, or the soft ache of comfort after pain. In the years after Bundy's death, she stopped writing about crime for a while and started writing about the human heart. How it breaks, how it heals, how it forgives. She often thought about dreams as bridges, quiet crossings between the seen and unseen. When we dream, she said, we return to a state before language, before rules, before memory shapes who we are. Dreams don't ask us to be good or bad. They simply show us what we carry. Some dreams are kind, others are confusing, but all of them are true in their own mysterious way. The human mind, she reflected, never really forgets anything. It simply folds memories away like pages in a book, some easy to reach, others hidden beneath years of dust. Sleep allows the mind to turn those pages gently, to revisit moments that never had closure. That's why sometimes when you wake from a dream, it feels like you've remembered something ancient, something that didn't come from this life, but from a deeper knowing. Psychologists call this process integration, when the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind find a way to speak to each other. It's a conversation without words, a quiet exchange where confusion becomes calm. And often wondered if that was what forgiveness really was, not forgetting what happened, but accepting that it exists within you and no longer fighting it. In the stillness of her small home, surrounded by her books and letters, she would often sit and listen to the hum of the world. A car passing in the distance, a dog barking once, the wind pressing gently against the window pane. Life continued its soft rhythm, as if reminding her that even after the darkest stories, there is always continuity, a heartbeat beneath the silence. She wrote in one of her journals, "We live many lives within one life. The one we show, the one we dream, and the one that lives quietly in our thoughts." It was her way of understanding that people are never just what they seem. Each of us carries layers, like overlapping dreams, some peaceful, some restless. And through it all, sleep remains the great equalizer, the one moment where everyone, no matter who they are, must surrender. Bundy's story had once terrified her, but years later, it became more like a shadow, she had learned to live with, something distant, softened by time. She no longer saw him as a monster, but as a broken human whose mind had lost its balance. In her later interviews, she often spoke of the importance of compassion, even for those we cannot forgive. Compassion, she said, is not agreement. It's recognition. It's seeing that somewhere inside, the same spark that lives in you lived in them, but something somewhere went wrong. As she aged, her nights grew quieter, but her dreams grew gentler. She often dreamed of walking through forests, sunlight weaving through the leaves, the air cool and clear. In those dreams, she felt no fear. It was as if her mind, after years of writing about darkness, had finally learned to rest in peace. If you listen closely now, you can almost feel that same calm, the quiet after long reflection, the serenity that follows understanding. There is no rush in this space, no noise demanding attention. The mind, like water, begins to settle when left undisturbed. Thoughts sink slowly, and what remains is clarity, soft, translucent, steady. The story now isn't about Bundy, or crime. It's about the rhythm of existence, how pain transforms into wisdom, how fear softens into peace, how even the most haunting memories lose their edges when seen through the lens of time. Every story, no matter how dark, eventually fades into stillness, just as every night eventually gives way to dawn. You might feel that stillness now, that subtle slowing inside you. Your heartbeat steadies, your breath lengthens. The mind begins to drift, not away, but inward, toward that deep and ancient space where everything feels familiar. That's where dreams live, waiting patiently to take you by the hand. Dreams are not escapes. They are returns. Returns to what the waking world forgets, that everything we fear is only temporary, and everything we love is never truly lost. So, as you lie there, eyes heavy and breathing calm, imagine and sitting by her window one last time, the soft glow of morning light on her desk. The pages of her final notebook rest open, words half finished but peaceful. She smiles faintly, knowing that not every story needs an ending. Some simply fade into quiet understanding. And now, you too can let this story fade. Let the words drift away like mist at sunrise. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to remember. The story has done its work. The mind has listened, understood, and now it wishes only to rest. Let yourself drift, weightless, into the same peace and found. The peace of knowing that every shadow eventually turns to light. Sleep now, gently, without resistance. The night holds you, the world hums softly, and tomorrow waits patiently beyond the horizon. The light of morning slowly spread across in small study, brushing softly against the spines of her books, the scattered pages of unfinished notes, and the familiar cup of cold tea beside her. The air felt still, yet alive, filled with the quiet hum that comes just before the world fully wakes. She often said that the morning was not an ending to sleep, but a continuation of dreaming in a gentler form. To her, the mind never truly stops dreaming. It simply changes the shape of its stories. As she aged, her thoughts became slower, more tender. She no longer rushed to understand everything. She allowed mysteries to remain unsolved. She had learned that some truths reveal themselves only when we stop demanding explanations. Sleep had taught her that the art of letting go, of trusting that the subconscious knows what the conscious cannot yet grasp. In her later writings, Anne often reflected on memory, not as something fixed, but as something that breathes. Memories, she said, are like ripples on water. They move, they fade, they return. What we remember changes each time we recall it, shaped by who we are in that moment. That's why dreams can turn pain into poetry. They reimagine what once hurt until it becomes soft enough to hold. She would sometimes wake in the night and write only a few words in her notebook. Phrases like forgiveness is not a choice, but a release, or we are healed not when we forget, but when remembering no longer hurts. These words came to her like whispers, not from the world outside, but from somewhere deep within the folds of sleep, where truth often hides beneath calmness. Her home grew quieter with time, but never lonely. The silence carried warmth, like an old friend who understood her need for stillness. The ticking clock, the sigh of wind through the curtains, the soft rustle of a page turning. All these sounds became part of her nightly ritual. In their rhythm, she found peace. Many of her readers imagined her surrounded by darkness because she wrote about crime, but her world was filled with light, small, steady light. Candles, the soft amber of her desk lamp, the gentle colors of early dawn. She believed that to truly understand darkness, you must first honor light, not as its opposite, but as its companion, and often spoke of human nature in the same way. She said that within every person lives a constant conversation between shadow and sun. Our better selves guide us toward compassion, while our hidden fears whisper from the corners. To live fully, she said, is not to silence those whispers, but to listen without letting them rule. It was this understanding that made her writing timeless. She didn't chase sensationalism or shock. Her words invited reflection. They slowed the reader's heartbeat, softened judgment, and replaced fear with awareness. Even now, when people read her words late at night, they find not horror, but a strange serenity. Because at their core, her stories were never about killers. They were about the fragile, extraordinary complexity of being human. If you're still awake, you might notice how your breathing has settled into an easy rhythm. The story has grown quieter, and so has your mind. The line between reading and dreaming has begun to blur, the same way twilight melts into night. You're no longer analyzing the words, only feeling them. They move through you like slow waves, carrying away tension, leaving only calm. And once described dreams as the ocean of the soul, vast, deep, and always moving. She believed that when we dream, we return to that ocean, where time doesn't exist and all things are connected. There we are not our names, not our histories, not even our thoughts. We are simply part of the quiet current that holds everything together. Sometimes she would imagine what it would be like to never wake, to simply remain within that ocean of thought, not lost but held, not asleep but at peace. That, she said, might be what eternity feels like, the endless unfolding of gentle understanding. Her life, like all stories, was a cycle of beginnings and endings that slowly became one. Each book she wrote closed a chapter of her own healing, and each ending was really just a deeper rest. The same could be said for you. As you listen, your thoughts, your memories, your worries, they're all stories the mind tells before sleep. And soon, they too will rest. The human mind has a way of carrying too much. It holds old pain, unfinished plans, silent fears. But when you sleep, all of that weight begins to lift. The mind files away what it needs to remember and releases what it doesn't. Sleep is not just rest. It is the great sorting, the gentle organizing of the soul. As you sink deeper into that stillness, you might imagine and sitting quietly in her chair, her eyes closing for the last time as sunlight spills across her room. Not an ending, but emerging, her thoughts, her words, her life, all blending into the greater rhythm of things. The same rhythm that moves through you now. Outside, the world continues softly. Trees sway unseen but felt. The earth breathes beneath the weight of the morning. Somewhere, a bird begins its first song, not to wake the world, but simply because it exists, because this is what it means to be alive. And so, as your breathing deepens, you begin to understand what and came to know. That peace is not found by escaping darkness, but by learning to rest within it. That light doesn't chase the night, it grows from it. Let this thought be the final one before you drift. That every story, no matter how heavy, carries within it a quiet promise of rest. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to forget the noise of the day. You're allowed to trust the silence. Now, the story dissolves completely. There are no names, no places, no time. Only breath, only calm, only the steady, comforting rhythm of existence. guiding you, softly, into the deeper dream that waits beyond these words. The world outside had long since woken, but in Anne's home the light moved slowly, respectfully, as if it too wished to remain in quiet thought. Dust floated in golden lines through the air, and every small sound, the creak of the floorboards, the flutter of a curtain, felt soft, patient, and alive. She would sit there sometimes without writing, only breathing, her hands folded in her lap. Those who knew her said she often looked as though she were listening to something invisible, as if the silence itself were telling her stories. She came to believe that silence was not emptiness but presence. It was the sound of everything waiting to be understood. After years of studying cruelty and chaos, she learned that silence was the opposite of violence. It was gentleness in its purest form. When she wrote in those last years, her sentences became slower, almost like lullabies. She wanted her readers to feel safe enough to think deeply, to face difficult truths without fear. Her stories no longer ended with tragedy, but with stillness. There was one thought she wrote again and again in her notebooks. The heart wants to rest. She had seen too many people carry pain for too long, mistaking endurance for strength. But endurance without rest only hardens the soul. Sleep, she said, was a gift, an act of grace we give ourselves each night. It's the body's way of whispering, "You've done enough for today." If you're listening now, you might feel that whisper in yourself, the quiet permission to stop trying, to stop holding, to simply be. There's a kind of peace that comes not from solving things, but from allowing them to remain unsolved. That peace feels like the rhythm of slow breathing, the heaviness of eyelids, the weight of a body sinking gently into the bed, and used to compare life to a long conversation with the night. We ask questions with our actions, and the night answers with silence. In that silence lies wisdom, not loud or clear, but deep and patient. Each evening, as the sky darkened and the world turned blue, she would light a small candle and watch its flame. It reminded her that even the smallest light can survive endless darkness. That image comforted her, as it might comfort you now. A single flame, flickering but steady, surrounded by infinite calm. The mind, she said, is like that flame, sometimes trembling, sometimes still, but always there. No matter what stories it has seen, no matter what pain it carries, it continues to glow. And the purpose of sleep is not to extinguish it, but to let it rest safely in the dark until morning. She often wrote that people fear the dark because they confuse it with loneliness. But true darkness is not lonely. It is quiet companionship. It holds you without needing to speak, surrounds you without expectation. To lie in darkness is to return to something ancient, something familiar. Before there was language or memory, there was this, the rhythm of breath, the gentle pulse of life. As you breathe now, you are part of that same rhythm. Your chest rises and falls like waves against the shore. The thoughts that once seemed loud begin to dissolve. Worries lose their edges. Fears loosen their grip. You realize that peace doesn't come from pushing things away, but from allowing them to be soft again. And believe that the human spirit always moves toward gentleness if given the chance. Even after the harshest experiences, something inside us still seeks kindness. Sometimes it takes years to find, but it never disappears. She saw that truth again and again in her letters from readers. People who had been hurt, who had read her stories, and who said that through them they learned not to be afraid of feeling deeply. That, she said, was her greatest achievement. Not the books themselves, but the quiet healing they inspired. To her, writing was never about the darkness. It was about showing that light still existed in its shadow. And that lesson belongs not just to her, but to anyone who has ever endured something and still found the strength to hope again. If you close your eyes, you can imagine her sitting there still, the candle flickering beside her, the room warm with calm. The page before her is blank, but doesn't matter. Not every page needs words. Some moments ask only for silence, and in that silence, Life continues its slow, gentle rhythm. Outside, the world hums softly. Leaves move in a faint breeze. A bird calls once, then stops. The sky shifts through shades of silver. Time loses its sharpness. You feel the same peace she felt, the awareness that nothing more needs to be done, that the night itself is enough. Sleep comes easily in moments like this, not as a demand, but as a natural arrival. The mind has traveled far through memory, reflection, and understanding, and now it simply wishes to rest. Thoughts grow light, floating like feathers. The boundaries of the room fade. What remains is warmth, breath, and a soft pulse that matches the heartbeat of the world. And once wrote that the end of every story is not death, but rest. And in that rest, the story begins again in another form. Perhaps as a dream, perhaps as a quiet feeling of peace that lingers into morning. That is how life renews itself, through cycles of awakening and surrender, tension and calm, light and dark. So, let this be the place where you rest too. There is nothing left to carry. The story has folded itself into stillness. The mind is safe to wander into dreams. Whatever images appear, faces, places, memories, let them come like passing clouds. They mean no harm. They are the language of the soul speaking softly to itself. As you drift further, imagine that gentle morning light once again, filtering through the window of Anne's room. The candle has gone out, but the warmth remains. The world outside is quiet, kind, and whole. That same quiet now surrounds you. Every heartbeat is a reminder that you belong to something steady. Every breath is a return to peace. The story continues without words, carried now by the rhythm of your sleeping mind, soft, endless, and safe. Now let go. Let the world recede. Let thought give way to stillness. You are not falling. You are floating. You are not alone. You are held. The night has no more questions. It only offers rest. Time, like a river, carried the story of Ted Bundy and in rule far beyond the moment it ended. Years passed, and the world moved on. Yet something about that story continued to stir quietly in human memory. It wasn't just about crime or fear anymore. It was about how fragile, complex, and mysterious the human soul truly is. People began to realize that the story wasn't just about him. It was about all of us, about the silent duality that every human heart carries. The capacity for good and evil, empathy and apathy, truth and disguise, all woven into one fragile consciousness. And Rule often spoke about that complexity in her later interviews. She said that what haunted her most wasn't the horror, but the realization that Bundy had been capable of genuine kindness. He could comfort someone, make them laugh, listen deeply, and yet behind that warmth, there existed an abyss no one could truly see. It made her reflect on how people often wear masks not to deceive others, but to survive themselves. Sometimes, the lies we tell the world begin as lies we tell our own hearts. In the quiet rhythm of her writing, she discovered a strange peace. She understood that not every darkness is meant to be defeated. Some must be understood. That understanding doesn't excuse evil, but it helps us recognize its roots: fear, pain, rejection, loneliness. Each of us carries a seed of both creation and destruction. What grows depends on what we nurture. Over time, the world turned Bundy's story into documentaries, films, and studies. But for Anne, it remained a quiet, private memory. The echo of his laughter in the call center, the way he listened, the way she never saw it coming. She once wrote that she wished she could go back, not to stop him, because she knew she couldn't, but to tell her younger self that sometimes life will break your sense of certainty so that you may finally understand compassion. As she aged, her voice softened. She spoke more of healing than horror, of awareness rather than fear. She told her readers that evil only wins when it teaches us to stop trusting, stop loving, stop believing in humanity. But if we can look into the abyss and still choose empathy, even for those who have none, then we are not defeated. We have learned what it means to be truly human. When she passed away, many remembered her not just as a writer, but as a witness to one of life's most painful paradoxes, that sometimes light must stand beside darkness to see itself clearly. Her life became a quiet message to the world. Awareness is not the enemy of peace, it is the path toward it. And so, as this story drifts to its end, the night becomes still again. The chaos fades, leaving only the soft hum of thought and breath. You may find yourself reflecting, not on the horror of Bundy's acts, but on the resilience of those who faced that darkness and continued to believe in light. The world is full of shadows, but shadows cannot exist without light. Close your eyes for a moment and let that truth settle deep within you. That goodness is not about perfection, it's about choice. Every day we choose what part of ourselves we feed, the one that harms or the one that heals, the one that hides or the one that shines. And Rule once wrote that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without hate. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson that remains when the noise fades away. That even when we encounter evil, we do not have to become it. We can see the darkness and still choose to love. So tonight, as you rest, remember, the mind that once created monsters can also create miracles. The same consciousness that dreams of fear can also dream of hope. You are not defined by the shadows you've seen, but by the light you still carry. Let that thought guide you gently into sleep, where fear dissolves, forgiveness breathes, and peace begins again.